Thank you for tuning in to No Sudden Moves Radio. And remember, stay on the proven path so you don't risk falling behind. Here at Business Legends, we don't overthink it. Look around and see what everyone else is doing. If it's working for them, it will work for you.
Welcome to Wait It Out, where we believe there's no reason to act now. The opportunity will still be there when the timing is better.
The age of disruption isn't coming, it's here. And the boldest move isn't following the crowd, it's following your why. I'm Patrick Ledden, and you're listening to Disruption Lab. Hey folks, it's Patrick. Welcome to Disruption Lab podcast. This week I sit down and I talk to Tommy Pennington. Tommy Pennington is just 1 year out of college, and over the course of the last year and the 4 years before that while he was going through school, he started not just one, two, but three organizations all designed to tackle some gnarly problems. Tommy loves tackling gnarly problems. You're going to hear this in our conversation today about three big ideas he had and how he went into the process of making those ideas come to fruition. Along the way, you're going to learn about risk, taking chances, jumping in the deep end, pivoting when it makes sense, doubling down when it does as well, and learning the entire time. What I want you to do is, as you listen to Tommy and how he had tackled some big ideas in his world, to think about, might there be some things you need to disrupt in your world around the big ideas you have? Maybe go from talking about them at cocktail parties or with your friends, or thinking about them before you fall asleep at night, to actually bringing them to fruition by choosing to be a positive disruptor. So sit back, take some notes, prepare to talk to Tommy Pennington and I about how to disrupt your big ideas. Tommy Pennington, welcome to Disruption Lab.
It's great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Great to have you here. Where are you joining us from today?
From our Simply office here in New York, New York.
New York, New York. So in the big city, huh?
Yep.
Exactly. They say if you can make it there, Tommy, you can make it anywhere. Isn't that what they say?
Certainly hope so. It's definitely a change of pace from Nashville, but we've had a blast so far.
Absolutely. So you and I have that in common. Both spent some time at Vanderbilt's campus. You graduated how many years ago now?
Last year.
Last year.
Yeah, coming up on the 1 year anniversary in a couple weeks.
So 1 year in, and you've been a busy human being. You were busy when you were at Vanderbilt. You've been busy ever since then. I was telling you on the front end, I'd love to talk to you about just some of the ability that you have or the willingness that you have to step out and disrupt some big ideas. And everybody listening to this podcast probably has some ideas floating around in their mind of the business to start or the conversation to have or the whatever it might be, but they don't always bring those to fruition. And sometimes they need to be the one that kind of puts it into motion. So if you don't mind, tell a little bit about your background and then we'll jump into some of the big ideas you're disrupting.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to. Like you mentioned, Vanderbilt grad. So really got my start kind of taking big swings, really my freshman year, when I found an organization called the Vanderbilt Fusion Project, where basically a bunch of us got together in an East Common room. We're like, okay, what's the biggest challenge we could tackle as freshmen here at Vandy? And the idea we came up with was to try to build a miniature fusion reactor on campus. So spent about the next 4 years really digging in there on the deep tech side, and actually ended up achieving plasma under fusion conditions my senior year. But that was a crazy journey. And then on the other hand, did a bunch of work in actually the nightlife space, which is probably about as far from fusion as you can get, building an identity-based ticketing platform that we piloted with folks like Barstool Sports and Virgin Hotels. And then post-grad / my senior year, we actually did a complete pivot and got into the humanitarian aid space. And build a philanthropy platform called Simply, which is what I'm currently working on.
All right, so let's break each of those down, because at this point, everybody's like, what exactly was this about with this project? So let's talk about the first one, because I think I remember hearing about it years ago when I was teaching at Vanderbilt, this idea of, hey, what if we had something the size of a soccer ball that could do something really powerful? Am I remembering this right?
Yep, exactly. Yeah, a star the size of a soccer ball.
So what exactly was this all about?
Yeah, so the goal is to actually achieve fusion, so the same force that powers the sun, in kind of a desktop setting. So really trying to take this idea of how can we do work that's traditionally been the purview of national labs or billion-dollar startups and accomplish it on campus as undergraduates. And we were fortunate that a lot of research had been done back in like the 1960s, 1980s around this idea of inertial electrostatic confinement fusion, which has sort of a couple trade-offs. The main trade-off is you're not going to get power plant output. So not trying to power New York City with it or even Nashville, but the benefit is that you can actually do it on a desktop setting very cheaply and very efficiently and still get those neutrons. So that really resonated with us of, okay, we can prove that we can dig in on this big picture concept without having to go raise $1 billion as a bunch of 18-year-olds.
So what does it mean to say you got to plasma?
Yeah, that was a huge milestone for us. It actually was funny. Most of the real legwork was less on the engineering side and more on the administrative and organizational side, where the actual physics behind IC fusion is pretty straightforward. You build a vacuum chamber, you pump in a lot of voltage, you add some deuterium gas, and then bang, you get neutrons, you get fusion. The real challenge was, how do you build an organization that can, one, design and build each of those systems, like vacuum chamber, high voltage, etc. But then two, how can that student organization engage with campus to really prove that, yeah, we can do this safely, we can do this responsibly, and kind of earn the trust of the university to actually go and turn the thing on. So it took us around 4 years to get the blessing to test plasma. And then we knew at that point that, if we actually used deuterium fuel and took it off campus somewhere we could safely generate neutrons, it would work for fusion. So hopefully the current students will do that in the fall, fingers crossed.
Yeah, I can imagine they're like, you're going to do what with what? And you're going to blow up one of those brand new buildings we built? What's going on over there?
Yeah, exactly. It was pretty funny. We're freshman year. We were fortunate enough to get our backing from some of Vanderbilt's major donors like the Ingram family and Ainsley family. So we kind of showed up on the map as, hey, we're backed by the chancellor's office and a bunch of major donors, but no one knew who we were, what we were trying to do. So I remember actually getting a call from Vanderbilt EHS asking about the fission reactor in my dorm room. And we were like, wait, we're not splitting atoms here. We haven't even ordered a single part yet. We're just getting started.
That's awesome. All right, so let's take it. So I want to kind of position this like, okay, that's one big idea that you were trying to do. And then tell us about the next one.
Yeah, so the next one was, again, totally orthogonal to fusion, looking at the nightlife space where, like a lot of other freshmen, spent a bunch of time down on Broadway. And what really struck with me was how chaotic it was, where you have these huge lines every night of people trying to get into the bars and clubs. And the engineering part of my brain was like, this is so inefficient, there's gotta be a better way to do this. So Wave started out as basically a line skip pass, and we rapidly realized that the real opportunity was, how can you get high value patrons into the bars faster and ultimately do targeted marketing? So dug in that space for a couple of years too, kind of just, work a different side of the brain, work a different muscle, and ended up building a functional identity ticketing platform. But that was a pretty fun side quest.
So where'd that end up at?
Yeah, so my co-founder Luke Rickers took that over post-grad because I had to go work on Simply full-time after we raised venture funding my senior year. That's still kicking down in Nashville, hopefully getting acquired soon. Again, fingers crossed.
All right, and those who don't know, Broadway, when you mention it, that is the downtown area in Nashville, Tennessee, where all the bars and clubs are, the honky-tonks, the lines of people trying to get into these different venues. And you're saying is, hey, we're going to figure out a way to get people to skip the line, get the high value customers in the door quicker. Mm-hmm. All right,
exactly.
That's another big thing, very different. I guess you're creating energy and excitement in a different way, right? But you're getting down there, and you're also at this point, you're having to convince other people to get on board with an idea. All right, so that's number 2. Now let's talk about number 3.
Yeah, number 3 is definitely, I would say, my biggest swing yet. What we're building at Simply, our whole team is actually pretty much Vanderbilt alumni, which is fun, very full circle. But our goal is to build infrastructure for product giving for Americans. So the big challenge is every year we have hundreds of billions of dollars of perfectly good products that major brands send to landfill. So that could be because it's out of catalog, like it's winter clothes in the summer. It could be slightly damaged, or the really tragic one is it's just a little bit too close to expiration date, which in CPG corporate context could be as far as 6 months out. So you still have a ton of usable shelf life left. And then on the other hand, we have 30, 40 million Americans in need. So our whole thesis that simply is how can we connect those companies with a ton of excess product to the people who needs them, and how can we automate that so you can do it at scale? Not talking about a pallet here, a pallet there, a couple boxes, but how do we clear entire warehouses of product and do that autonomously?
So as I listen to these various initiatives, certain things pop into my mind. Like, there's obviously a tech component to everything you're doing. There's obviously a big influence piece associated with what you're doing, because you've got to get others on board and help them think through the risks of these different things. So what I'd love to do is, now that we've talked about these three things in general, let's just kind of talk about what you've learned from all this, Tommy, because again, there's people listening right now that might have some big ideas, but they're not sure what to do with them other than talk about them at a party with somebody and then go back to their whatever else is their regular life, which can be great, but they might miss an opportunity to do something bigger. So first of all, let's just talk about, in general, like when you look back at these last three things, these are all pretty big runs, and you're a young guy. I mean, to swing like this, what have you learned?
Yeah, I think my biggest learning is just really jump in the deep end. I think the best way to learn is by going out and trying to do the thing, because it's always so much more complicated than you initially might think it is, and there's so much room to go learn and grow. So I think that's my personal through line, is when I see a big challenge that interests me, I just kind of go swing for it. I would say, as kind of a secondary learning to that, all three of my big initiatives so far have been really different. And I think part of that is, there's a lot to be said for focus and really trying to solve a problem. There's also a lot to be said, in my opinion, for pivoting to new problems if the opportunity arises. Like, even as late as senior year at Vanderbilt, I would have never guessed I was going to be in the social impact space working on a philanthropy platform. But when the opportunity came up and I was like, hey, there's a lot of great people working in nuclear energy right now. Obviously, that's a really pressing problem for the world. There's no one working really in the social impact space for product donations and trying to take this more operating system infrastructure approach. If I don't take a swing at that, realistically, I don't think anyone else will. So having the commitment to see something through, like Vandy Fusion, but also being willing to pivot your career and kind of disrupt yourself.
Yeah, that's so true. And I liked how you said that, there's a lot of value in focus, and we talk a lot about focus, or people come on the podcast and talk about focus, but what about this idea of pivoting to new challenges? Have you always been like turned on or excited by challenges like that, jazzed by them?
Yeah, I think it's incredibly fun. It's funny. I've heard it referred to kind of as like the entrepreneur like bug or like curse, where as I'm walking down the street, I'm constantly like, oh, I could fix that. I could go build something better. So I think that's where, again, it comes back to this focus versus also being open to new ideas, where if you try to solve every problem, you're not going to solve any. But if you're completely married to one, you might go miss the bigger opportunity that's right around the corner.
Do you see similarities in the various initiatives you do, even though they're kind of in different spaces, solving different types of problems? You start to realize, oh, there's a thread or a process or something consistent across these.
Yeah, I would say definitely. I think the big thread is they're all really big, kind of nasty, definitely gnarly systems problems. Where Fusion, you have, obviously the actual engineering systems themselves, which all break down to subsystems, really complex stuff. But you also have Fusion within our society and within organizations. Like, it's great if you can go build a reactor without getting buy-in from your team, your broader organization, even local government or federal government stakeholders. You're not going to get anything done. So kind of systems within systems. Same thing with Wave with nightlife. It was, how do we tackle this big dynamic system? First on Broadway, but really looking nationally, how can we optimize data for nightlife? And then it was simply, really we're tackling the systems that drive both prosperity in terms of, consumer packaged goods and corporates, but also poverty in America. How do we understand the root causes of poverty? How can we more efficiently route goods from companies that have too much to those communities and individuals that have too little? So kind of systems and systems and systems.
So I would imagine within all these systems, you start to see there's inertia going on, and there's also incentives playing into this. So let's take simply right now. There's probably the challenge that the problem you're looking to solve, or the issue you're looking to address, or the big idea you've been working on. People have probably seen this and been like, there's got to be a better way. but then
Yeah.
then they start to run into something. What are some of the things that you start to run into, obstacle wise?
Yeah, there's there's probably too many to count. I think probably the biggest challenge is just how do you do this at scale, which is really what's blocked a lot of corporate giving in the past. A lot of our clients, if not all of our clients, have had in-house in-kind donation programs, but it's always been constrained by manpower. You might have one person in marketing who does this kind of on the side, or maybe you have someone in supply chain who does this once a quarter, but their job is to go out and make money. They're for-profit businesses. They're not in the business of philanthropy. So they'll donate maybe a pallet, maybe 2 pallets, at best a truckload a year. Where Simply comes in is we can basically act as a centralized infrastructure layer for all of these corporates and do it full time. We're in the business of product philanthropy. So we make it viable to build the technology that automates this that then all of our clients can use. So I think that's one challenge of, okay, how can you take a problem inside an organization like a Fortune 500 company and then say, okay, if this was outsourced, maybe there's enough demand across the ecosystem for a company to really do this and take a run at it. So that's been one of our big learnings, is that yes, you can do that for product donation. Some of the other challenges that you wouldn't expect are, how do you actually get this to the right charities? And we really discovered that not all charities are equally good. There's a ton of great charities, but it's really needles in the haystack. You have to parse through millions of charities in the US to find the ones that can accept product. And then you have to dig even deeper and say, okay, who's actually brand aligned with this company? Because if you're not brand aligned, your CMO is not going to endorse this donation program. Or what charities really have inventory controls and personnel controls, so that we know if you get $1 million of cosmetics, half of it's not going to end up on the street. How can we prove that and prove it to the client? Just the complexity balloons exponentially as you dig in further and further.
So there's a lot of vetting and a lot of matching. Let's kind of bring it into. I'm intrigued by this. So let's say, for example, that I represent company A, and we have let's just say we have some durable goods that we sell, and all of a sudden, we change SKUs, we change something. I've got a warehouse building up with this excess inventory, and I'm trying to figure out what to do with this other than send it to a landfill. And what I hear you saying is I might reach out to you then and say, I've got this thing, or how does that work?
Yeah, or ideally we'll find you a lot of times first with our kind of outbound program. But basically once we've kind of aligned that you have enough inventory to make sense for Simply, where we don't do single pallets, we just do big bulk donations. We leverage our mission match technology, where we spent the last year mining pretty much all the publicly available data on charities in the US. So we actually have 4 times more data than the IRS. Sounds crazy to say, but we can then leverage that data to go find the brand aligned charities that we think can take your inventory. And then we have to go out and actually get in touch with those charities, where some of them might be on our platform, usually they're not. So our impact team actually gets in touch with the director of the charity, goes through all of our vetting procedures, and then we're able to manage all the shipping, all the logistics, all the reporting. It's funny, like with our platform, we actually make the reporting and data bits super easy, which has also been a huge blocker to companies in the past. Because it's one thing to do the thing, it's a completely different thing to do the donation and then prove that it went to the right homes.
Mm-hmm. Do you actually warehouse inventory yourself at all, or does it go directly to the charity?
Yep, directly to the charity. So we do all the managed logistics included. So we'll send a truck, we'll pick it up at the warehouse, and then we'll Tetris that out to, it could be 1, could be 10, could be 100 charities, depending on the size of the donation.
So as you're going through the process of doing this, and I love the kind of explanation is it makes it more understandable, I think, for me and probably for the audience as well. But as you're going through this, you mentioned earlier, there's sometimes we need to pivot. For example, you said when you're working with the bars downtown or trying to work with the bars downtown here in Nashville, you realized, the opportunity is really here, we're going to pivot. Have you made some pivots along the way of building Simply? And then on the back end of that, how do you know when it's time to pivot on something as opposed to double down on something?
Yeah, I think most of our pivots have really been in our go-to-market strategy, where we start out, my co-founder Teddy actually operated kind of the precursor business to Simply called Donating Simplified post-COVID, which was really focused on cleaning supplies. And so when I came in and we refounded the business, decided to take a run at it, our entire book of business was in cleaning supplies. And we kept doing sales there, and there weren't a lot of bites. It was people would be interested, but their willingness to pay was pretty low because it's big industrial janitorial supplies companies. They just want to match the cost of destruction. So we're like, okay, what if we look at other spaces where there's a lot of excess, there's probably higher willingness to pay. And then we pivoted our ICP. And then we were like, okay, there's a lot more interest here. There's definitely a better product to be offered. But we're still struggling to actually close the deals. And we took another step back and we were like, okay, what would actually make a client do this as a no-brainer? And the answer was, we'll just match the cost of destruction. So it was really taking a learning from our first ICP of cleaning supplies companies and then applying it where our product fit better, which was kind of branded CPG, so personal care, cosmetics, things like that. And then the combo of the two has been like kind of a slam dunk for our go-to-market strategy over the last couple of quarters, where we can now walk into the room, we're like, hey, we've listened to your peers, we have a product perfectly designed for this category, and we'll match your existing budget, and people tend to get pretty happy.
Yeah, I bet. I love the idea of cross-pollinating ideas. Sometimes we don't do that as well as we maybe could. And you talked about earlier saying like you walk around and go, that could be better, or that could be run better. And I think that one thing that we found as we were studying these positive disruptors in our research and read about them in the book is some people are really good at paying attention to things and then picking up on the insight. We call that's actually behavior number one, is the idea of like you pick up on the insight, and an insight is something that few people know, but it's valuable, right? Mm-hmm. There's something to it. It sounds like you have that strength. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, I might even say that's my biggest strength in many ways. It's just I'm always looking around and trying to learn how things work. And then when I come across a new challenge, could be in an area I've never touched before, like take shipping. Shipping is a huge part of our product at Simply Now. I had no knowledge of it whatsoever when I started the company, but a lot of our learnings, could be from Fusion, could be from Wave, were directly extensible to it. Like, oh, okay, the real challenge here isn't on the tech side, it's actually around the people side. So how can we build guardrails to make communication as seamless as possible? And how can we add blockers to make sure that things can't move forward if we're missing data? Like all those organizational learnings were one-to-one, was trying to stand up our new Simply Ship product. But again, they were completely different domains.
What it really comes down to, it sounds like, is figuring out what is the problem we're really trying to solve here.
Yeah,
right?
100%.
Because you can spend a lot of energy behind trying to solve the thing that really isn't the root issue. Was there something in schooling that helped you think about this? Is it something about the way the team works? How do you, because I'm just thinking about like somebody who might be like, I got a big idea, but I need to make sure I'm solving the right thing. How do you get your arms around what's the right thing we're trying to solve here? Is there certain questions you ask or mantras we all live by, or what have you learned around that?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is I've spent a ton of time trying to solve the wrong problems in the past. I've definitely taken my lumps at Vandy Fusion and Wave. So now I'm a lot more cognizant on the lead-in side of, okay, let's really try to understand what we're doing here and why we're doing it. And we built a culture at Simply where we actively seek to challenge assumptions. So if we're going a certain way, we'll say, okay, hold up, let's take a step back. Why are we doing this? Is it just because it's been how we've done it historically, or is this really correct from first principles? Or, okay, we're thinking about a new product launch for a client. Has the client asked for this? Like, do we think there's a legitimate pain point here or a way we can add value? So a lot of it's been really cultural. And then of course, like within the classroom at Vanderbilt, I think a lot of, especially the higher level math classes actually, has really trained me of like, okay, let's think and then kind of iterate through some testing and then get to a solution, as opposed to jumping down the wrong path too early.
No, that makes perfect sense. I was actually talking to a client earlier today, getting ready to do something with them next month, and they were talking about this idea of creating an environment where, like you said, challenging assumptions, and wanted me to help them think it through. I'm just curious from your perspective. So, you're building a team, you're building an organization, you've raised some funding to do this, you're seeing successes. Mm-hmm. Every time you add somebody new to the team, you're adding, variables to the culture. And the question becomes, what are the things you do that become ritualistic almost, or practice almost, that these are the things that make it okay for people to challenge things?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think we're still working on developing our rituals very candidly. We've started really changing how we do our stand-ups as a component of this, where instead of it being the classic, more engineering style stand-up, where everyone's like, okay, here's what I'm working on this week, here are my blockers, et cetera, et cetera. Mm-hmm. We're starting to make it more of a team culture event of like, okay, what are our big North Star goals? What does everyone think are the drivers that are going to get us there? What challenges have we encountered over the last week or 2 weeks that, maybe you have something nagging at the back of your mind. Like, now is the time to vocalize that. Do you think we're going in the wrong way? Almost more philosophical weekly team meetings has been a component. And then that only works if you have a culture of comfort. So we like to say, like, it's simply like house music is one of our company values, where a big part of our culture is we'll go out to concerts and team events, especially my co-founder Teddy having a background in entertainment, where getting people out of the office into a different setting helps to build that comfort so that in the office we could have real discussions and even debates around what we're doing and why.
Yeah. Yeah, I do think that's really important to build that type of relationship with people. And I love the idea of this big North Star, because you're right, stand-up meetings can be beneficial, but sometimes what can happen in those meetings, honestly, is that while somebody else is talking, you're thinking about what you're going to say. And then when it's your turn, you say your thing, and then you kind of check out because you're done with your thing. And I know that's not what's really supposed to happen. We're supposed to help each other deal with the obstacles or things that are blocking our path and understand each other's bandwidth better. And those are all beneficial things, and they can be done. But there's a different kind of vibe going on in that type of session, as opposed to saying, all right, let's collectively brainstorm our way to something. Let's collectively vision of what we're trying to achieve. It's just a different type of thing. And it's instead of it being 5 independent players or 10 independent players or however many are on teams, we're one unit trying to do something together.
Exactly. My co-founder Teddy's really good at this, where the natural kind of inclination of most people is they'll just start rattling off, okay, I'm working on this, and this. And Teddy will be like, okay, but like why? Why are you doing this? Should we be doing something else? Mm-hmm. How can the team help you achieve this bigger goal? That could be helping with like items A, B, and C, or it could be, okay, let's go stand up a new product to really enable you and leverage you. So I think that's part of this too, is how can you create a team culture where people are thinking bigger and, less in their lane and more looking across the business.
So what has Simply been able to accomplish, and how long has it been at it?
Yeah, I would say we've really been at it full time for coming up on a year now. Obviously we've been kind of cooking in the back burner, where Donating Simplified was a sort of portfolio business, my co-founder. But I joined, I guess, summer of 25, to kind of refound the business and spin out as a tech startup. Started putting in the legwork for that all through my senior year. We raised our first $1.5 million of funding while I was still a senior at Vanderbilt, so that was pretty fun. But then we got to New York in June of last year, started working out of the back of someone else's office, and then just really been running since then. Just for a little sense of the trajectory, we started off with borrowed office space, so there's a table in the back of our landlord's office. To our new office today is about 3,000 square feet right by Penn Station. So the team has exploded, and we've been really running pretty fast.
That's awesome.
Still a ton left to do.
How about moving product from donating organizations to end users? How's that going so far?
Yeah, it's going great. To date, we've done around 70 million in product donations. Last quarter, we actually had more donation volume than all of the last year. And this quarter, we expect to double that again. So with any luck, this year we'll be donating anywhere from 150 million to 400 million plus in product, just based on current pipeline.
Wow, that's awesome. What's the next horizon beyond that?
Yeah, I think really my North Star, kind of putting on my product hat, is how can we build an operating system for charitable giving, where it's one thing for Simply to be able to basically act as a managed service for big corporates and help them donate their goods, but ultimately I want to be able to have any corporate log on to the Simply platform and do a donation autonomously, end to end, and act more as an infrastructure layer. Mm-hmm. And then as a code to that, once we have that infrastructure, really building a data layer for impact, so that any stakeholder in America can see, okay, this is where there's the most need, these are the best charities, here's who's taking the aid flowing through the Simply platform, really maximizing the outputs. And then, hopefully we continue to really make a dent in poverty with these, kind of new class of in-kind donations, but also hopefully we inspire other people to go tackle different elements of this problem. Like, how do you do volunteering more effectively? How do you stand up a charity more effectively, based on problems you're seeing in your community? Maybe you're a government stakeholder. How can you engage more effectively with nonprofit organizations and NGOs in your community? There's just so many different ways we could take this over the next few years.
So let's say you and I are hanging out at a cocktail party. You're telling me about this, and I was like, all right, Tommy, what's like the one right now that you're like, this is an example of what we've done that just shows you the power of this type of thing?
Yeah, I think maybe my favorite donation was actually one of our smallest donations. It was a pilot for one of our clients where they had little kind of like holiday gift sets. And it was our pilots we were donating just a pallet. And we routed a lot of it to this school up in the Bronx here in New York. Mm-hmm. And we go to this school, we're handing it out, and these students, this was like the first time they'd ever had really high quality personal care products like this. And they were so excited to be able to go give these gift packages to their mom, their sister, their grandma for the holidays. And just like their faces lit up. And that was one of the more humanizing moments, I think, for me, where typically I'm in the engineering seat and I'm looking at all these numbers on a dashboard, but being able to see the stories firsthand is a completely different thing.
Yeah, I mean, there's something really special, right, to see it firsthand and to go from the number on the screen or the system we're trying to improve to seeing what it looks like when a mom opened up a gift from a child on a holiday season type of thing. That's really cool. All right, so as we wrap up our conversation, I got two questions for you. One I'll hold off for just a second, but the last one just on this topic. If somebody's listening to the conversation and like, gosh, I have big ideas and I see what's going on in the world and I pay attention, but for some reason I stall or I don't make it happen, what would you say to somebody like, here's a way you can just take that first step?
Yeah, I mean, my advice is always to take the plunge and just give it a go, because worst case scenario, you fail and you learn something. I think now it's been the easiest and best time to build probably in human history, where you can go out and you can leverage the latest generative AI tools and have an engineering team in your pocket. You can have a marketing team in your pocket. You can have a team of consultants to help you think through, okay, what are my first steps? How do I form a company? Or even before that, how can I go find my first potential users to do customer discovery? I think the downside risk is so much lower now, and the barriers to entry are so much lower. I would tell them to just go out and take a run at it.
I love it. Go out and take a run at it, folks. All right, so here's the final question. Listeners know this, but just so you know, I have had a long-term relationship with a coffee shop that is in every city around the world, it seems like. And I go in this particular place and get a vanilla latte, and the person wearing the green smock serves it to me. And I like that place. I enjoy going there. It's very consistent. My producer for the podcast, Jess, said, how could you talk about disruption and not even disrupt the coffee you're drinking all the time? So I have been on this quest, or at least this adventure, that every week I have at least one picture of me drinking coffee from some other place, usually while I'm traveling somewhere, and giving it a shot to try to find that perfect vanilla latte. So my question for you is this. Is there a perfect drink, or you could extend it to food if you want to, but drink that you're either pursuing or you have already figured it out?
Ooh, that's a hard one. I think I'm about to get onto a quest for a better coffee myself. We have a big Celsius culture here at Simply, where our fridge, we had a kick out of this, is just full of cases of Celsius, comes on auto delivery. And I think it might be time to branch out a little bit, especially in New York. I feel like I got to start taking better advantage of this.
All right.
So that's actually the top of mind in my morning walks.
So you'll keep us up to date on this progress, right? I'm sure.
I will.
All right, awesome. Well, hey, man, thank you so much for joining us, encouraging us to disrupt our big ideas, put them into practice. I mean, my goodness, you've had a career worth of experience from first year in college to now, which is pretty amazing. And I agree, sometimes we're just a little bit afraid to jump in the deep end. And the nice part is with technology, and somebody further down the road might be like, I got a mortgage and I got a couple kids. I don't know, jumping in the deep end can be dangerous, but you got a good friend in your pocket called your phone that can look up all sorts of things and help you jump into that deep end in maybe a little bit of safer ways, but still give it a shot.
Yep, 100%.
Thank
Thank you again for having me.
Oh, my
It's been
pleasure.
great.
And say hi to Teddy for me.
Will do.
All right. Thanks so much. Well, folks, that's all I have for today's episode. Big thanks to Tommy Pennington for joining me to talk about how to disrupt some big ideas. Along the way, you heard him talk about Teddy Raskin. James Patterson and I actually tell Teddy Raskin's story in our New York Times bestseller, Disrupt Everything and Win. I encourage you to pick up a copy, read Teddy's story, and also stay connected to this episode and future episodes so you can learn how to disrupt yourself, your teams, your organizations, and so much more. If you liked what we shared today, share it with a friend. Help them to disrupt their big ideas as well. That's all I have for today. Thanks so much for joining me. My name's Dr. Patrick Ledden. Now go make it a great day.